Today we are doing a very interesting topic, and it is about limiting beliefs. And we have come across that in a lot of like our personal growth conversations, shadow work conversations, and there's a lot of truth in that when we have limiting beliefs, that it is so difficult for us to actually overcome them, right? Like oops, this is where all my I forgot to turn off all the volume of all the other devices. Yep. So yeah, the truth of the matter is that when we have a limiting belief, it actually sucks a lot of energy and limits a lot of things that we are capable of doing of. So yeah, this is going to be the topic that we're going to tackle today. Quick introduction. I'm Teresa, founder of Solistic Clinic.
And I'm Sydney. I work with Solistic Clinic as a channeler and coming to you from Singapore in the late evening.
And directly from Germany, also working and collaborating with Solistic Clinic, Annie Lebrun. Yo.
Beautiful, beautiful. So yeah, limiting beliefs. Let's talk about ourselves. Do we have any limiting beliefs ourselves? Yeah.
Yes.
All the time,
Yeah.
probably.
Who first?
Actually, I can talk about one that I came to you for. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, Teresa. Actually, I wasn't even thinking about it in our session, but I would always have this thing where I cannot ask other people for support when I'm feeling down or when I'm struggling with something that I'm working on or just like a life challenge. I would always feel like I have to get through this. And I would be really super happy and comfortable to share my experiences with people, but only after it was over. When I
mm,
was in the middle of it, it would always be like really, really difficult for me to ask anyone for help. It felt like I had to use all of my energy and just physically, emotionally, everything. I need all my energy just to ask someone or just tell someone like I'm going through something. And when we went into the session, it was actually my higher self that had the issue of like being in a leadership position in like their past situation or something, and they felt like, my job is to bear the burden for the rest of the community, and if they are the ones who know like all of the difficulty that is happening, then what would be the point of my role? And like basically it's like I'm supposed to alleviate those sorts of worries and not let other people know about them and just like figure it out by myself.
wow.
And so I remember you and the other channeler like working on that as well as part of that session. And I just thought it was so interesting because first off, I never really thought about it, but I would always hear that voice be like, we gotta, we are the strong one in the situation. We can't be just like, putting our burdens on other people and being negative like that and all that kind of thing. So that was a really interesting one that, funnily enough, was like working on and trying to get through because it's like you can't ever create anything just in a vacuum all by yourself. But I was constantly putting myself in that situation. I was getting so frustrated. Like, why do I keep sabotaging myself like this specific way every time? And since then it's just been so much easier. Like there's still sometimes it's like that thought, it's like an echo of it will pop up, but it doesn't feel like I have to like use everything in me just to like get past it. So I think that was a really interesting experience for me personally with
That's
limiting
beautiful. I
beliefs.
think that is a very common and relatable limiting belief. But people don't realize they actually have that as a limiting belief.
Mm,
'Cause I remember going through a lot of cases and even talking to people who are under hypnosis, that that is one of their limiting belief, that they cannot get the support, they cannot show vulnerability, because then the consequence they can't bear. So wow,
mm.
I'm glad that you brought that one up. That's a good one. Yeah. Any limiting beliefs?
I can share you one.
Yeah.
I always thought that channelers or mediums or being psychic abilities would happen when you're young. You
Oh,
know, when you're a child, when you're children, and when you're teenagers. After that, if you're past that, then it's gone. So I was quite surprised to be able to channel at my ish years, and then I realized like that was one of my limiting beliefs, as I thought, oh, okay, after 40 or after 30, it's gone. Like you don't, if you
Mm.
don't, you didn't have it, you don't, it's finished. You're done.
yeah. Well, I'm glad you broke that limiting belief. For myself, one of my limiting beliefs is actually quite interesting, is that I have always been afraid of women. That
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, my limited beliefs about women is that they are not easy to deal with. They are very, like, all the stereotypes of, like, the matriarch being fierce, dominating, controlling, and all that. And and I didn't realize that. Except that
Mm.
when you have that lens on, that's the thing about a limiting belief. You actually put on that lens, right? So I have that lens of women being tough and being fierce, being difficult, being um bitchy, if that's a word that I could use,
Right.
right? And all my childhood, I continued to be bullied by women, by girls, like,
Mm.
in playground. They would snatch my food. They would, and that continues. Like, if I'm using a color pencil, they want the color, they'll snatch it from my hands and stuff like that. That happens since I was like 5, 6 years old, and all the way till I'm in university. Like, the women will gang
Mm.
up against me and stuff like that. Well, they will talk bad, and just make things difficult for me, right? And I didn't understand why is it so difficult until I went through a hypno session, and I realized that in my past lives I had come across moments where women bullying women, women just being nasty to women, and then having that understanding in those past lives is that women's survival was dependent on the men uh, choosing favors, right? And so if you are outstanding, you're supported, all those things, then other women are then deprived of those resources, because at those days when a man could have like 3 or 4 wives or a harem, limited resources, and yet so many women. So I had those beliefs formed, and then that lens on. So after that hypno session, I realized that, oh my God, it's not true.
Mm.
um Everything changed, and I was able to then build beautiful a relationship with women, like with all of you.
Yeah, I would never have expected that considering the amount of incredible women that I've met through you, and it's like spending time with you myself. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's so interesting.
That, yeah, even now talking about it, there is like, wow, I remember those days, and also remembering those past lives. I was like, wow. So yeah, there are a lot of limiting beliefs in that's formed through that past life, or through our journey of all those past lives. And that was one that was a continued pattern for me, that if I didn't do that hypno session, past life relief session, I wouldn't have been able to break through. I don't think so.
Mm.
Yeah. So wow, thanks girls for sharing all our very personal limiting beliefs. So what are some of the common beliefs, limiting beliefs that we have come across?
Hmm. I think there's always been a pattern of like what you've had, where it's not necessarily girls, but it'll be like, oh, not trusting authority figures, or I'm not safe to share my gifts. It's kind of like there's a danger to some aspect of your self, or like the relationships you're allowed to have, or the gifts you're allowed to express. I think
Mm,
that's the common trend.
yeah. So I think the common ones that we often hear, in the personal growth area, are always a very generic one, which is about not being good enough. So there's a need to prove and show that how we are good enough. Um, and definitely in our healing sessions, that comes up very regularly, where they have been in situation to prove to themselves that they're not good enough. So, just sharing, like 2 days ago, we worked on one case, and this was a case where the wife actually signed up the husband for the case, for a session, because the wife felt that he has got potentials that has not been completely developed. And then when we went in to the session and went to find why was that the case, there were a lot of times when he didn't trust himself making decisions anymore, because every decision he made, he then end up in deep trouble, like losing family, losing his position, losing his life, so much so that he felt like he cannot take any responsibility and make decision. So then it became a very difficult thing for him. Like, he literally, if he has to make a decision, he's so scared. Like, what TV do you want to buy? You decide. What car do you want to buy? You decide. What do you want to eat? It's okay. You can decide. It became that kind of situation, and becomes really difficult because he had a limiting belief that he wasn't aware of, that he better not make any decision. Because if he did make any decision, there may be consequences that is going to be too drastic or too traumatic. So he's like, I'm not going to make any decision. I thought that was quite interesting when we went through the past lives, and then we had to help him break free from that belief. Yeah, that was one that was just very recent. Yeah.
I don't know if this is related to limiting beliefs, but that just feels like a trend. I swear we just had another case recently with a similar theme of like the wife saying, I feel like my husband isn't like there's something holding him back from his full potential. What is this theme?
Yeah. So I think, especially for the males, right? There is the need to show that I'm strong, I'm tough, you can't bully me and stuff like that. There is that kind of belief that they need to portray that they are strong and that they are tough and that they are capable. And only through that they are accepted and fulfilling their role as a husband, as a man, as a father, and all that. So that is also one common limiting belief. And when we extrapolate what a limiting belief does to our relationships and to our life, it can be quite an interesting observation. So just imagine, right? When a man feels that he needs to be tough and that he's an authority figure and that he's, a strong, dependable father, that is his frame of mind and his limiting belief. But imagine when you're interfacing and interacting with a man with such belief. Can you imagine how difficult if you challenge the authority, you challenge and question his decision making? It will have some level of trigger, right?
Yeah.
And then whatever that trigger means, it may mean shutting down, or it may means that I'm extremely angry. How dare you challenge my authority? And yeah, it will be such a difficult relationship between father and children, father and husband and wives. So that's what a limiting belief does. Like my case, where every woman then becomes so scary, right? Because I had the lens on, and I would behave that way towards women. So I'm glad that when we are working on limiting beliefs, it really helps with their transformation. I think that's what we're here for. We actually look to a limiting belief.
We did have also cases which was a little bit the other way around because of the authority figures where the persons are not taking responsibilities or really don't want to get out of the comfort zone or even out of their houses. So, or meet new people. It's like staying at home.
Hypochondriac.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's an extreme stuff, but I'm just thinking of one in particular, like didn't have like a passport, remember? Like didn't have a passport, didn't want to, look for a job. Was like maybe I'm confusing with two. and also didn't want to travel or see more world, like was afraid of new things or yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I
showing
remember.
up.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I remember that case where that like I'm not leaving my hometown. It's danger outside. There's danger outside. Yeah. So yeah, that is also definitely a limiting belief, and a lot of people would have that. Um, but I think that's a borderline thing where they will also classify that as mental wellness issue, where you know they you actually get certain level of anxiety and triggers when they had to be pushed to do something they're not comfortable. So that's it can be formed through limiting belief.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
Any
mean, yeah. Oh, I was just to say, sort of when like you're both saying these events or things happen in our lives that kind of push on the edges of that belief and challenge it. And then it can lead to things like if it's, for example, the example you gave, Teresa, where let's say the man becomes very angry about or defensive about it. I it's kind of the nature of beliefs in general. It's like when we hit the edges of a belief, it's interesting to watch because there's that instant reactivity of no, it's like everything outside of the belief is really scary because the belief is like how the world works or how I work as a person.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I just thought that was very interesting.
In a lot of the cases that when I worked on both as a hypnotherapist and also working with you all as a channeler,
Hmm.
here's the interesting thing about a belief. Because the belief defines us, who we are and how we navigate the world often is based on the lenses that we put on. And then that is the lens we see the world, which means then it would define who we are to interact with the world, right? And there are certain muscle tensions.
Mm.
Well, let's just say whatever belief we have, we may hold the tension around the jawline. We may hold the tension around our eyes. We may hold the tension around our forehead. So there are a lot of little these signs when a person have a very strong belief, right? They may have a clenched jaw or a very stiff jaw, or their gait or how they hold their body. So very often when I'm working on cases, either hypno cases or transformation cases where we are doing channeling, um, and when we break through a belief that no longer serves, the person will actually look different. When they go look in the mirror, they go, how come I look different? And I remembered for myself personally, when I finished the case, a session where I managed to break through that limiting belief about women. I remembered that day I went into the office because I did the session before I went to work. When I arrived in the office, people walk past me and don't recognize who I am because the energy of how I held myself was completely different. Because there's no more that belief that somebody's out to get me or that I'm in an environment that's not safe. So my face and my looks actually changed. And the energy of how I carried myself was also different. So much so that people walk past me and go, where's Teresa? Then I go, I'm here. They go, oh, how come I didn't recognize you today? And so that is something about limiting beliefs, or the beliefs that we hold. When it doesn't serve, it makes us tired and it takes and drains energy from us. And that we're not free to be who we need to be and what we need to be and how we can show up for the others. So that's something about limiting belief that I find it to be very fascinating and to be very gratifying when we are working and helping people along their transformation journey. So let's talk more about the common types of limiting belief. So we talked about one, which is we're not good enough. What others ever come across? I mean, you mentioned about authorities, the fear of authorities. absolutely. So when that happens, you know, the reaction towards authority, you become rebellious, or you could be completely docile, or you completely shut down. Yeah, I think that's a pretty common one. Oh, the one that you mentioned about yourself is asking for support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any others that's common?
I think it's fun because it's like everything has a root in not enough. So it's like if we branch out from there, I being I think there's like aside from mine, which was about like support and being supported, there's also being feeling seen or like accepted by the people around you.
Mm. And you brought up a really good point. The word acceptance, like one of the most terrible thing that we could experience is rejection,
Mm.
right? Because a lot of things and a lot of decisions that we're making is always based on how much acceptance and who we value to accept us, right? Um, so that actually comes from the root of our DNA for survival.
Yep.
So if you go back to the tribes days where we are hunting or being hunted by the lions or by the tigers, the need for a tribe to support you is so strong. And if, let's just say, whatever we do is not accepted by the tribe, and then we get rejected, and then we are left to fend for ourselves, and the chances of us surviving against that one tiger or that one lion and be food is a very high chance of that may happen to us. So it's been programmed into us that, we need a tribe to survive, right? So that is also a belief that is so strong within us that's very hard to shake. So even now, I think the Harvard's research about longevity is having community.
Yeah.
Right? It makes us happy. We feel safe. There are people that we could share our experiences with, and that will bring us back to, our comfort zone. And that is the fundamental of where we form certain belief to ensure we stay in the tribe of being accepted, being not rejected, and live,
Yes.
right?
Yes, you have to live.
Yeah. Any thoughts on the limiting beliefs or any observation that you have about limiting beliefs?
Well, just a new case this week where I realized there's like the people like us in this life now being awake, where we have our own thoughts and the limiting beliefs but there are sometimes also the limiting beliefs of higher self or the ego and also the souls. So it makes a little bit more conflictual sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And that was like pretty impressive to see how the higher self had pretty much like the limiting, or thought it like everything was going that way, and then the ego also like being persistent, like I'm going that way. This is my limiting this belief, and then yeah, so that was pretty interesting to see.
So that's a very interesting thing that you brought up. So in relation to the work that we do as channelers, and because we give voices to the higher self, give voices to the soul, and give voices to the ego, we do realize all the individual personality living in the same body, trying to navigate the life, they all have their own limiting beliefs.
Yep.
Right? And sometimes when we do healing, we have to do healing for each and every one of them individually, because each of one of them have different experiences that they bring to contribute to this life. Like the limiting beliefs of like there's not enough of abundance, because one of them could have been starved to death before. Or the limiting belief of having to work extremely hard and still is not good enough,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or the limiting belief like you are not worthy to occupy the space. Those are the cases where we see that they are suicidal because there's a constant voice inside there. You're not worthy to occupy the space. You're eating up resource. You're not worthy to even live. So what are you doing here? And that is a constant record playing over and over again that the person will go, okay, let's just end it now. There's no point in continuing. Yeah. So I think for a lot of times when we actually do trace back the limiting belief, which is one of the reasons why I think it is so hard to shift a limiting belief, is because if we trace back to all the different past life, let's just say it was first created in one life, and then it becomes a pattern,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, like if you hadn't cleared that limiting belief around women, then this life would just add to that. It would just be like, see, all of these women were like bullied me and were terrible to me. Women are, yeah, oh, yeah.
So it adds on to that, right? So which is why when people say, oh, let's just shift your limiting belief and move that. But it's so hard to do it if there's no story behind it. Like you don't really know. Let's just say it's been formulated about women not being good enough and women have to be subservient to men, right? And let's just say that belief came from a few lives ago where this, for me, part of a harem, right? And that in the harem, you have to fight for attention, then you can live. Otherwise, you are subservient to the men, right? That's a limiting belief. But this life, I have really great men as friends. So where did that come from? There's no story for me to go clear that limiting belief. So that's why it's so hard to clear a limiting belief if you do not know where it came from. And then why was it here in the first place? So, which is why for the work that we do, I think is just so helpful when we actually give the soul that access to that memory and help them understand that when that limiting belief was first formed, it was in a different time, a different situation, a different role, and therefore it doesn't apply to this life.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not just randomly having souls remember stuff and leaving it. We make sure that they understand that it no longer applies and that they're safe now. Yeah.
Exactly. So, which is why I think that, very often when you do a lot of affirmation, is that I am abundant, I'm abundant, I'm abundant. It doesn't really help if you have many lives of starving to death or being denied food and denied access to resources. So there's no point having that affirmation, I am abundant, I'm abundant, I'm abundant. When there is can't solve that. Yeah, go on, Annie.
Now, I was going to say that it's a good start. It's because you're still investing energy. You're trying to change the frequencies. So if it's a small step towards change, but it's always good to have help, especially with a team. I'd like to maybe add an experience also as a channeler before knowing that I was one. I was younger, I was very emotional, and I cannot control my emotions. And I thought the limited belief was really, if you can't control it and being stoic, then that means you are weak. And so I've been basically sabotaging for long years instead of allowing the emotion to do the work and finally understand what it was meant for. I was basically working against myself all the time and restricting myself also to go out to the world because I didn't want to show up like this or even have, is the more you try to control, sometimes it's the opposite that happens, especially with emotion. You like, you see somebody crying and you don't want to cry. You start saying, I don't want to cry. I don't want to cry. First thing that was going to happen is like, so I didn't want to show up being emotion and, or like somebody would do a comment like, you're so sensitive. Like for me was like, such a not a compliment at all, the opposite. So I would
Sure.
feel shame. Yeah, it triggers, but also like, splashing my whole me and my soul probably with shame. And yeah, so definitely awareness is one of the key elements to be able to scoop up exactly your limiting beliefs and also what they are actually doing on your life now. And yeah, so I just wanted to share with you is I think that as channelers, we often feel a lot of things, and sometimes it's not even yours. So you're trying. So he's like, stop it, but please don't come out. But actually, it does need to come out, and like we're here to transcend and transmit. So definitely, yes. So if you realize that you're trying to maybe as a limiting belief and you think that you're being emotional is maybe negative, you might want to consider that one and strike
So,
it out.
so we talked a lot about the creation of the limiting belief. There is a story, there's a scenario.
Yeah.
But let's talk about why we created a limiting belief.
Good.
Oh, easy.
Why?
Well, the belief is meant to be there to help you navigate your life. So if it showed up that way, that was the best way that you knew how to process that situation at the time. And it came up with a strategy where it was like, you know what? If we see things this way, we continue surviving. And then that sticks.
Very, very important. Annie?
Mimics, like you do what you see, you just repeating, doing. Yeah.
Because it helped you through that one time. Or like the case where one of the case where he made the bad decision, he's like, I'm not gonna make any more decisions.
Right. Yeah. It's like, clearly I suck at this. I should just stop.
I'm not gonna make any more decisions, so don't put me in a situation where I'm gonna make a decision. You decide. You want to marry me? Sure, okay, you decide. Right? So when we break it down to the really crux of it all, a limiting belief came about to protect us.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I agree.
Yeah. It's very hard, people judge that you have a limiting belief, right? Which is why when we are doing the healing, it is so important to let the soul or let the person see the story of when that was first created. It was created from that perspective of your understanding of the situation at that time. So I remembered one case where the guy felt that in this life he better not trust anybody and better not make any friends, because in that one life he felt he had trusted and completely surrendered to that friendship, and he was betrayed by that friendship, and he lost his position, lost his family, lost his life. That in this life he's like, I'm not going to form any deep friendship. So in that healing we needed to take him through that life and then give him the perspective, look at the big picture, and for him to understand then, wow, they were equally vested in the friendship, but it was just that they were different religion, they were different race, and they then had to do the thing that they didn't want to do to a friend, but it was because of the community taking priority. And that really healed the soul a lot, to know that he was actually equally loved by his friends. And it really shifted him that he can learn to build friendship again. And I thought that is just beautiful, because can you imagine navigating a world with no friends? That would be so sad and lonely. right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think what's so beautiful in the work that we do when we're channeling is with a limiting belief, it basically gives you the impression that you found the best solution and the best perspective on a situation. So for us to be able to go in and, show the soul or whichever aspect has that belief, to be able to show it, okay, here's a different perspective on that situation. Here's what the other parties involved were actually feeling about this. Do you still think that the solution you chose, the strategy you picked, is the only way to see this?
Yeah.
And I think that's really lovely that we get to help them do that.
Yeah, like today, the case that we worked on, it was quite an interesting and difficult case because well, I thought it was difficult, but Annie was the one who had to hold the energy. She thought it was pretty straightforward. Uh, because what happened was that the soul of the client that we're working with, his higher self was from the 14th dimension.
Mhm.
His ego was from the fifth dimension. It's quite funny because then the higher self and the soul keep saying that the ego is very primitive.
That's so mean.
I know, because so basically the way they described the ego was like the ego was a bit like a caveman. So so
Yes.
so there was a lot of limiting belief that came from the caveman, right? Where you're hunted and you will get tortured if you get caught and you get eaten and all that. So it's a very restrictive behavior from the ego with all that limiting belief, thinking that people are going to come after you if you allow yourself to put yourself out there in the world. You are exposing yourself to danger, and then that there are opportunities for others to come and take advantage of you, betray you, and all that. So the higher self and the soul wants to go out there, meet more people, experience new things, and the ego was like, no, no, don't you dare do that. I'm here to protect you. You are not going to do that, right? So we then told the ego, I said, do you accept some healing? And he was like, no, no,
No.
you're
Mind
doing,
your own business.
yep, yep, like leave me alone, right? But like, okay, I said, can asking for permission to heal the past life. And even then it was so hard to access. So in the end, my solution was to show him the whole story of the life and whether it aligns with his understanding. And it turned out that it was his different understanding. He said, oh, nobody was actually coming after me. Nobody was trying to hurt me, but he had that programmed inside him. So that really healed him very quickly. But it took us a long time to persuade him to get to where he was receptive to even just watching his life and review his life. Then he goes, yeah,
Mhm.
nobody's here to want to eat me, hurt me, betray me. But also very often these limiting beliefs may also come from our parents,
Mm.
where they will say that if you don't study hard, you're not going to be good enough, you're not going to marry well, you're not going to get a job, and therefore you're going to be like trash or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, they're trying to give you their best strategies. They're like, this is how it is, my precious child. I want you to know all of the best strategies for living in this world that we find ourselves in.
Exactly, but all come from a good place.
Yeah.
And the place that it comes from is where we are here to protect you. We're here to keep you safe. We're here to allow you to come up with all this navigation tools so that you can have the best life ever.
Yeah.
But I remember one case. This was an interesting case where the soul cannot accept that it cannot solve a problem.
Uh-huh.
So the limiting belief is that if it did not solve any problem, then it's in deep trouble.
It has
But
to always solve problems.
you always have to solve problems.
So it always had to create problems then.
Yeah. So
Oh no.
yeah. So it became a case where other people's problem became the problem that this client wants to solve. So the good part is become very helpful, right? She will look out and say that I identify a problem in you. Allow me to come and solve it for you. So that was interesting spin to the positive side of it, of that limiting belief that I must like. So the idea is that no problem is supposed to be good, too difficult for me. I should be good enough to solve every problem. And then of course, if you're not able to solve the problem, then the anxiety, the worry, and everything, right? So when we trace back to this case, it turned out that there was a past life where this person was a scientist, and it came up with a idea of how to survive in the war. But this, just think of it as an advanced civilization that was so long ago. And when they are at war, it'll be hard to get food. So he came up with the idea is that how through one supplement, you don't have to eat forever, ever, or change of DNA that you don't have to eat forever. And then the idea is that you start with fasting, and then you clear, and then you take that pill or the supplement to change your DNA such that you don't ever have to take food again. However, that experiment failed. Many people who believed him died of starvation. But that wasn't the real root of the reason why he has to solve all problems. It turned out to be that the mother, who was the mistress of the king, wanted him to succeed so that she can become queen. So that was the story behind it, but of course forgotten, right? That I have to solve all problems so that my mom can be the queen and then she will love me more. So when we actually revisited that case and helped him realize that, hey, your mom is stuck in her own trauma of being a mistress of the king and thinking that she would ever be a queen if you solve problems. It is not yours to bear. And then when we managed to shift that, the person then became so much lighter and felt a huge relief that it doesn't have to go out seeking problem solving problems, seeking problem solving problems. So I thought that was quite an interesting case. I think that was a pretty recent one. Yeah.
Wow. That's so incredible. It's about the mom all along.
Yeah, in the end, it was about the mom. Yeah.
Wow.
So when we trace back to limiting beliefs, you just really don't know. If you don't know the story of when that was first created, it will be so hard to remove from the system because that defines us. It helps us navigate the world. It keeps us safe. As we all talked about how limiting beliefs was first created, is to protect us. Any interesting cases that you guys remember?
Gosh, that one was so cool. Oh.
You don't have one that beats that? Come on, we come across so many interesting cases.
Wow. I mean, it's like I mean, it's interesting because it's like sometimes it wasn't even belief, it was like agreements and all this other stuff as well.
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah, which is really interesting, but maybe another time. We did also talk about like the soul contracts and things like that as well.
Yeah. Did you have one case where it was agreement that became a belief?
I mean, I think there was one where it was like they it was like the daughter, she was there when their previous planet kind of stopped being able to host life, and then it broke. Um, and then she still had this agreement to try to help that species out.
Oh, yeah.
It was
That
like,
was
even if you continue having other lives after this, you're still linked to us and you still need to like come
sir.
back to us and yeah, look after us. And
Yeah,
then that was very draining.
absolutely. And it would actually form the very slave-like servitude
Yeah, like
mentality.
you can't just have your own life. You have to make sure that it works for us.
Yeah,
That was kind of the situation that we found there.
yeah, interesting. Yeah, I remember that case where the planet has really gone.
Yeah, it's gone. It
Yeah,
no
but there
longer
was
exists.
agreement that we will do whatever we can to sustain that planet.
Yeah, and like bring or like make a new one or find a new one or something.
Yeah,
Um yeah. So I thought that was really really interesting situation.
yeah,
Kind of sneaky, isn't it?
mm,
Hmm.
yeah.
I, I do want to bring up this theme that it was one of the meetings we have done, and then it actually mirrored one of the limiting beliefs that we have. Sometimes it's religious,
Mm.
and then I remember, Teresa, when you talked about that you were like, I think it was night of the Dark Night as a Soul, or explain that you were feeling like when your ears, your eyes are usually watery or they are crying, you feel the presence of, I think it was Lucifer or like
Satan.
Mm.
Satan, yes.
Yeah,
And it's like, oh no, Satan's going to talk, and it's like, oh, get careful, like my and first reaction, and for a long time reaction I had. And then you talked about like, Satan, like it's not necessarily the way we perceive this the situation, or like
right.
the way it was brought up to, as a small kid, like
Mm.
don't mess up with them. Don't talk, don't think about the demon, and stay away from there. So
Mm.
you brought this subject up, and then it changed the way. So, and you did mention, I was like, okay, they sometimes show up, and and then we started to channel them. So first of all, like I never thought I would channel, because it was limiting belief, was like you stay in the good, and already like putting a label, like stay in
Right.
the good, the right track,
Mm.
already judging that it
Mm.
was better like that. So yeah, so seeing and understanding. So could you remind us like how you encountered the first time Satan, and what was how
Yeah.
it explained like what was the purpose of it, like, and
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
my first encounter with Satan, I was so rude to him when the channeler brought him up. So he is one of those angels who has the ability to really break through a lot of veils, and that makes him very scary. So my channeler at the time, Puva, she was really quite innocent. She came to me for a hypno session, but because of my energy and she's a natural channeler, she started channeling. And that was my first encounter of somebody who I didn't train to be a channeler and being able to channel. But that was also the first time when Satan showed up. And I was like, what the heck? That really, like, what are you doing here in my sanctified, pure, holy room? What are you doing here, right? And that's when he's like, you're speaking like a very unenlightened soul. I was like, you judge. He's like, you judge me first. And we had a fun banter, but I was pretty rude to him at the time. I was like,
Mhm.
"What here and all that." But then because my channel was able to bring him on, then I told her that I want to speak to Satan again. And she's like, yeah, he's here, but he's not coming. He said, because you're so disrespectful. But it took me time to overcome my own judgment of what other people said of him, and experienced him myself to realize that it is so easy for us to label others and for the whole world to believe, right? The limiting, that limits our access to somebody to give us more wisdom, more knowledge, more information to support us and help us. It turned out that Satan really has been vilified. For what purpose? Like in the world that we live in, it's just always good to bind people together, to work together towards one common enemy, or one common, I guess, person who's different from the rest of us. It's so easy to create that, to bind people, right? When we do that fear, hatred, and greed thing. So when I learned to overcome that with Satan, and I was able to learn a lot of his observation of our human weakness, his understanding of how we need to overcome our limiting beliefs. And he showed me a lot of insights to where we have kept ourselves in a box because of our judgment. He really taught me a lot about judgment. And therefore, the work that we do today, one of the first thing that all of us all of you when you're being trained, right, is to remove your judgment of things. And look at how many cases we're able to break through because we are able to stop that judgment within us, even though we are afraid, right? The number of cases where a so-called demon showed up was actually a lost soul that was so angry and so betrayed and so hurt. And because we're able to lend him or her our voice, we're able to heal the soul, allow it to go to the light, and therefore heal all the fragments and all that was impacted. So yeah, Annie, thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, that was my own journey of overcoming judgment of something that has been labeled bad, and how often we come across that. Like people who are different from us, different race, different gender, different religion, different schools, all these things, right? It changes our interaction with them when we are given them a label, like, oh, somebody came from a prestigious school, so I need to talk differently, or somebody driving a different car or staying in a different district, or from a different religion, a different race. There's so many of these things that borders the line of stereotype and limiting belief is how we actually interact with people, and therefore judgment is the one that actually makes it very difficult. Judgment will actually emphasize our limiting belief. But as we all say, the limiting belief was first created to protect us, right?
Oh, since you mentioned about how judgment can amplify a limiting belief, I think I have a really fun story from my own past, where when I was a teenager and I first started dating, I was dating this guy, and I remember one of our early conversations was about our values, and we both talked about how it's really important to us to not be judgmental. So that was our early conversations. And fast forward to a little bit later, I started to notice that whenever he wanted to talk about someone and he didn't like them, he would go, not to judge, but, and then go into like everything he wanted to say about that person. Like, I think they're really lazy. I think they're irresponsible, or whatever it was, right? Just kind of go into that. And then I was thinking to myself, you told me that it was important to you not to be judgmental. And then I started to look at myself and I was like, now I'm judging him for being judgmental of other people. This is crazy. It's like this, it's like a like just like it's all building on each other. And that was when I feel so grateful to him for that experience, because I decided, I was like, you know what? We're always gonna have some degree of judgment. Like, yes, I did judge him, and yes, he uses the phrase not to judge in order to immediately go into whatever he wants to judge. But similar to how limiting beliefs are there to protect us, I was like, okay, the judgment is there to protect me, because if I'm like, for example, in an actually dangerous area and I need to look out for what's safe and what isn't, I need to be able to make those judgments very quickly and without overthinking it. And so I think since then, I don't think I'm a judgment-free person, and I don't pretend that I'm like not judgmental or anything. Um, but when the judgment comes in, I just kind of let it sit, and I'll be like, okay, that's what this judgment is saying about this situation, about this person or whatever. Let's see from actually experiencing them as clearly and as like openly as I possibly can. And then we'll see whether this judgment had any merit to it, or if I was just being having that little like voice there. So I just wanted to share that.
And I'm glad you shared that, because similar to limiting belief, judgment also came from a place of protection.
Yeah.
Right? Protecting ourselves from things that we're not familiar with, protecting ourselves from things that may put us in danger. And so that perspective of that, how are we protecting ourselves, is where all this was first given birth.
Mm-hmm.
Having that understanding will allow us to navigate logically to say that, are we really in danger? Are we just judging for the sake of judging because it's habitual? Because some people then become habitual in judging.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been so helpful even with channeling, because if whatever being comes in and I feel like a repulsion, or like I'm a little bit afraid of it, I'll just be like, you know what? I'll just see. We'll just see how it goes. Let it say what it needs to say or whatever, and then we'll discover the truth
Yeah,
as we dig into it.
yeah, I'm really glad that as the team of channelers, the number of cases that we're able to break through a lot more, it's because, we allow things that we are afraid of to come through, because we know that we are safe, because there's Violet Ray, there's the grid, there's the ascendants, the angels, who are all there to keep us safe. And that's when we allow these beings, to come through. I remembered like the case where I was working with Grace, and then she go, "Oh, Teresa, there is a very spooky man behind you." And I was like, "Lend him your voice." She said, "Yeah, but he looks really spooky." I was like, "Yeah, just lend him your voice." And she did, and it turned out to be a very old friend of my father's, who wanted to come and say and speak to me. And if we were so fearful of something spooky, like many other religions' way of dealing with exorcism, they would have captured the soul, and they would have really punished the soul. But we don't do that. We treat them with love, and we send them to the light.
Yeah, I had a similar one like early on in my channeling journey, where you were asking me to look into a case and then check like if there were any beings around the client, or if like any, any lingering spirits or whatever. And then it was like one of the things that I saw right next to him was this big dude, this big scary looking guy in like full armor, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm gonna get killed by this humongous, scary looking guy. But then I was like, all right, I see a man, Teresa. And then you're like, lend him a voice. I'm like, great. I'm so excited to. But it turned out to be one of his guides, who actually had the role of a general in the past. So that's why he was so like decked out in gear and really intimidating.
Yeah, see? Yeah, it's like, so from all these experiences, we learned, right, that, when we're able to see past our judgment, our limiting belief, we're able to access so much more of the world, and that we become so much more free to play around and have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
because they also help us to heal.
mm,
That's the main thing. So when we understand that, they're here to mirror. I remember one of the cases, we knew we were going to meet on the next day, and I started to hear a name. It was Beelzebub. Like, who's that? Like,
mm,
I don't know. Like, I know Satan, I know Lucifer, but Beelzebub, I didn't know who it was. And then it was like Beelzebub, Beelzebub, Beelzebub. So if I would have thought like, okay, this is not a, I put a label and I would judge and I would say, okay, this is a demon, or like it's one of the
mm,
brothers, or to the legion, or
mm,
I would have been afraid. I would probably have and contract and not allow this being or this entity or this energy to speak. And actually, Beelzebub, I'm very grateful, because Beelzebub really helped us to do a lot of work. So I realized that the more we are aware, it's all about awareness of our limiting beliefs, and if we can put that aside. And usually I speak to my ego. Thank you for reminding me that this could be dangerous, but I'm warning you now. Everything's fine. I'm safe. Thank you for
mm-hmm.
you're doing your job great. Take a break. And then and and the more this type of work that we've done, those cases, and the monkey god also, like, I didn't know who was. Like, and it was just absolutely mind-blowing in the way that I feel like I'm expanding. I'm less worried. So actually, it's just, I feel like the vibrations are coming up. They help out to clear. So thank God they are there.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. I remember one channeling that you did for Beelzebub, and he came to share the roles of the demons, is actually being a mirror to us humans. We're so quick to judge what's good and what's bad. But what he is really doing is holding up a mirror to ourselves to take a look. I need to find that recording because I
Oh,
thought
that sounds interesting. We should
it's
put it up.
yeah, I think there's so much wisdom in what Beelzebub says. You know, I feel that the demons here are really just like our tough teachers,
Mm,
right? We hate the people who are our triggers, but yet at the same time, we learn so much of ourselves when we are able to overcome that trigger. So yeah,
mm.
wow,
Mm.
so much wisdom. Well, we're coming up to the hour. Time to
Oh.
wrap up. So sad. So, what do we think about, the best way to overcome limiting beliefs?
Ooh. I mean, you mentioned what was it? When people
Awareness.
do like affirmations and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's like that's kind of a like Annie said, it's like that's when someone's first bringing awareness to it, and putting energy towards like saying, okay, I don't want to live my life from this particular like framework and strategy anymore. I want to shift it into something else. Um, I think for me, what I've noticed that I tend to do in just daily life is that rather than affirmations sort of just whenever, because I feel like it's really hard to muster up energy for affirmations just like randomly in front of the mirror. I will do it in the moments where I get triggered, where the belief triggers off, and then I will bring in things like that. So, I think ultimately, whether it's what we've done where we try to like get to the root of what aspect has that limiting belief and then show it like, hey, there's other ways to approach this. That's kind of the root of it, even in the work that we're doing on our own, at least the work that I do on my own is like, if a limiting belief comes up, I'm like, okay, in this moment where I have all this energy around the situation and feeling around it, I've come to actually use that moment to say, all right, what is an alternate way uh to view this situation, to feel about this situation? so that I can use that big moment of like emotion and energy and use that to be like, okay, we're gonna change the programming. Yeah.
Yep, that's really good way. Any?
I have a book that I almost done with it. It's called The Four. How does I
Agreements?
know in French is like les quatre lois Toltec, the Toltec.
Oh yeah, the four agreements
Yeah,
then.
Four
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
agreements. Thank you
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
much.
yeah.
Yeah, so I remember like, and this is something that is like number one, number two, number three. Like if you haven't read it, like it's really cool
Yes,
because
I have.
it brings you awareness of what you think and what you say on what if you are criticizing and or putting a label, and when you realize you do that, like you know that okay, there'll be a better day. It's not that it's bad. It's just that it brings you a lot of yeah, it brings you conscious and aware of what you're thinking and what you and actually then leads you to your limiting beliefs. I think this is really
I remember in the Four Agreements, and that story really boils well with me when it talks about black magic. When you're gossiping about others,
yes.
create that black magic for the others. I remembered how he talked about a lecturer, somebody saying something bad about a lecturer, and therefore you fail the exams when you could have completely have a different experience if you did not listen to your friend saying that this is a bad lecturer.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that that was a very powerful story because how often we have been voodooed by our friends without realizing. So my approach to limiting beliefs is where I talked about all these limiting beliefs first came about when we didn't feel safe. We created them to protect us to navigate the world. And therefore, for myself, every time before I go to bed, I was like, thank you for this amazing day. I'm so loved. I'm so loved. I'm so loved. And just knowing that because I'm loved, I'm safe. So that is how I always go to bed. And therefore, have sweet dreams. But yeah, just knowing that we are safe is also one way of raising our vibration because knowing the root of all limiting beliefs was created to protect us. So we're not here to judge the limiting belief, to say that it didn't serve. It served at that time. It just served now. And that's why we are trying to reprogram, rewrite what will serve us again. So with that, thank you everybody for your contribution and having such an amazing conversation as usual. Until next week, episode 10.
Yay.
Good
Thank you,
day.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Yay.